The sun was beginning to set over the city, casting a golden light on the buildings in the center. The amber reflections of the last rays of the day danced on the windows of the luxury boutiques, where wealthy clients strolled without hurrying. On the wide sidewalks lined with plane trees, waiters in white jackets set up tables on the terrace for evening service, while tourists took photos in front of the five-star hotels with their elegant facades. In his service vehicle, the agent Paul Lefebvre, a white police officer in his 30s, patrolled slowly, his elbow resting nonchalantly on the edge of the door. He loved this neighborhood. He liked to observe the comings and goings of rich clients, losing himself for a moment in the illusion of an elite world to which he would never truly belong. But even more, he loved the feeling of control his uniform gave him. Here he could spot those who didn't belong, those who, in his opinion, did not fit in with the decor. As he drove in sleep mode, fingers nervously tapping the steering wheel, his gaze caught on one vehicle in particular. A black sedan, luxurious, with tinted windows. A discreet but undeniably high-end car, the kind that only successful businessmen or diplomats would drive. Lefebvre frowned and straightened his back slightly. Something was irritating him without him being able to say what. His instinct, or rather what he believed to be his instinct, told him that this vehicle was an anomaly. He did not belong to the usual flow of big cars driven by senior executives in three-piece suits. He accelerated slightly, past the sedan to get a better look at it in his rearview mirror, then slowed down to find himself right next to it. Through the windshield he could see the driver. A black man. Alone. In a sober but elegant suit. Lefebvre felt his stomach contract imperceptibly. He licked his lips, suddenly more attentive. This man didn't wear the ostentatious signs of the rappers he used to stop for speeding.
No gold chain, no extravagant sunglasses.
No, this man had something sober, content. But it was indeed suspicious. Lefebvre felt an annoyance rising within him that he was unable to explain. What was a black man, alone, in an impeccable suit, doing behind the wheel of such a car, in such a neighborhood? He knew this scenario. He had seen it before. A valet taking advantage of a borrowed car? A crook. A well-dressed trafficker who wanted to go unnoticed? This doesn't add up, he muttered, grabbing his walkie-talkie. His thumb hesitated over the communication button. Should he ask for a vehicle inspection before taking action? No. No need to waste time. He was going to fix this immediately. He activated his flashing lights and told the vehicle to pull over to the side of the road. The next moment, the black sedan flashed and stopped smoothly against the curb. No hesitation, no attempt to escape. This annoyed Lefebvre even more. He got out of his car with confidence tinged with arrogance, putting his hand on his belt, near his gun. He knew he wouldn't use it, but he wanted the man in the sedan to understand who had the power here. The driver remained still for a few seconds before slowly lowering his window. Lefebvre expected a shifty glance, some nervousness, some clumsy justification. But instead, he was struck by the aura of authority this man exuded. He was tall, imposing, and his shaved head added to his charisma. His face was severe but serene, and in his deep gaze there shone neither fear, nor submission, nor even annoyance. Just a kind of resigned patience, as if he already knew how this scene was going to play out. "Good evening, officer," he said calmly. Lefebvre felt a shiver of irritation. Why was this man so calm? He chooses to ignore the greeting. "Your papers, immediately." His voice was harsher than he intended. He felt it. He wanted to create tension, to remind people that it was he who set the rules. The man raised an eyebrow slightly, but said nothing. He slowly opened the glove box, took out his driver's license and ID card, and handed them to Lefebvre with calm fluidity. Lefebvre grabbed them sharply and looked down at the documents. He quickly scanned the information.
Name, Daniel Konate.
Age, 52 years old. Nationality, French.
Profession, Chief General of the National Police.
Lefebvre felt a rush of heat rise within him.
No, impossible.
His mind searched for a flaw, a detail, A way to deny what he had just read.
Daniel Konate.
General-in-Chief of the National Police. No, that wasn't possible. Perhaps a homonym, an administrative error, or a fake document. He looked up, sizing up the man who was staring at him with disturbing calm. This look. There was no fear, no submission, no aggression. Just a controlled serenity, almost disconcerting. Lefebvre hesitated. His instinct was screaming at him to stop there, to return the papers, to pretend that he had made a mistake. But his pride refused to let go. He had to find something, anything, to justify this control. "Where are you from?" he said harshly, hoping to catch the man off guard. The general did not flinch.
From my office.
Where? At the National Police headquarters. Lefebvre felt a shiver of irritation run down his spine. Was he making fun of him? The answer was too simple, too clear. This man left him no angle of attack. Lefebvre clenched his jaw.
Exit the vehicle.
A long silence ensued. Daniel Konate sighed softly, like a patient teacher facing a stubborn student. Then, without a word, he opened the door and stood up. Lefebvre immediately felt the aura of authority that emanated from him. The man did not need a uniform to command respect. He was respect. His stature, his posture, his gaze. Everything about him naturally commanded a certain deference. Lefebvre, for his part, felt a confused mixture of irritation and insecurity. He had to regain control of the situation. "I'm going to do a search," he announced, trying to mask his confusion. Konate stared at him for a moment, a flash of discreet amusement crossing her eyes. Then, in absolute calm, he opened his arms. "So do it, Agent." Lefebvre felt his throat tighten. He did so, his hands trembling slightly as he moved over the general's jacket. He searched, desperate to find something. Nothing. Not a weapon, not a suspicious object, not the slightest valid reason to have taken the affront this far.
Used a black man in an Iscar.
A heavy silence settled between them. Lefebvre felt his own breathing quicken. Why was this man remaining so calm? Why didn't he protest? Didn't he get angry? The humiliation would have been easier to bear if he had shouted, if he had rebelled. But this silence, this total control, it was worse than anything. Finally, Konate broke the wait. "Do you have a problem with me, officer?" he asked softly, his voice devoid of any aggression. Lefebvre was about to respond, looking for an excuse, but fate did not give him time. A police car arrived in a hurry, braking suddenly just behind them. Lefebvre jumped. Two agents hurriedly got out, their eyes full of incomprehension.
"Paul, what's going on?"
asked one of the police officers as they approached. Lefebvre opened his mouth, ready to explain, but before he could say a word, the agent froze. He had just recognized Daniel Konate. A stunned silence fell on the scene. My general," he stammered, pale. Lefebvre felt his stomach twist violently.
"You're what?"
he breathed, his body becoming as rigid as a statue. The agent swallowed hard, casting a startled look at Lefebvre. "You just arrested the highest-ranking member of the National Police, idiot." Lefebvre had the impression that the world was crumbling beneath his feet. His ears were ringing. His heart pounded painfully in his chest.
Anaïs panic twisted his insides.
Daniel Konate, he didn't move. His gaze expressed neither anger nor arrogance, only impenetrable patience, as if he had been expecting this outcome all along. But beneath this calm, a silent lesson was being played out. Lefebvre had just learned, the hard way, that arrogance has its limits. And that, sometimes, it is those we believe we can humiliate who actually hold power. In the hours that followed, the affair exploded. Social media went up in flames after information about the incident was leaked.
Shocking headlines invaded the media.
A police officer arrests the Chief General of Police without valid reason. Racial profiling at the highest levels. How far does the abuse of power go?
Gwen ignerens humiliates authority.
Inside the police, the situation took an even more serious turn. The matter had become an institutional crisis. Lefebvre was summoned emergency at the headquarters of the National Police. He found himself sitting alone, in a large and intimidating meeting room. In front of him, Daniel Connate, sitting behind a large mahogany desk, his piercing gaze fixed on him. By his side, the Minister of the Interior in person, whose presence alone confirmed the seriousness of the situation. Other high-ranking officers were present, observing Lefebvre with an expression that wavered between contempt and disbelief. A heavy silence reigned in the room. Then, in a calm but sharp voice, the minister broke the silence. "Agent Lefebvre, can you explain to us why you arrested General Connate last night?"
Lefebvre skicks de gouri, de drai voce.
Every fiber of his body screamed that he should never have been here. "I was just doing my job, sir," he stammered. "Your job?" Daniel Connate repeated, crossing his arms, a piercing glint in his eyes. Lefebvre looked away. "You saw a black man driving a fancy car and assumed he didn't own it," Connate completed, his tone calm but implacable. Lefebvre opened his mouth, desperately searching for justification, but no words came out. What could he say? The Minister of the Interior leaned back in his chair, his fingers intertwined. "You arrested your own superior, the man who runs the country's entire police force, without a single good reason. Do you understand the seriousness of the situation?" Lefebvre nodded weakly. He felt like a weight weighing several tons was falling on his shoulders. How could he have been so blind? Connate, unmoved, slowly got up from his chair. His presence imposed silence. He went around the table and came to stand in front of Lefebvre, standing, dominating the situation with all his stature. "Tell me, Agent, if I had been a white man in this same vehicle, would you have had the same reflex?" Lefebvre felt his heart thumping in his chest. He opened his mouth, tried to answer, but no honest answer could save him. The silence that followed spoke volumes much more than words.
Connate slowly shook her head, her eyes full of disappointment. "This is the heart of the problem.
You wear a uniform that is supposed to protect and serve all citizens, but you have allowed your prejudices to dictate your actions." Lefebvre felt a painful lump forming in his throat. His whole body was on fire. I'm sorry," he whispered in an almost inaudible voice. The Minister of the Interior, who had remained silent, suddenly stood up. "Apologies are not enough," he declared in a firm tone. "It is time to act." Lefebvre felt his stomach knot. "An internal investigation is already underway. Your file will be examined by the disciplinary committee." The minister crossed his arms. "But beyond your personal case, this case raises a broader question. How many other innocent citizens have been arrested, humiliated, judged guilty based solely on their appearance?" Connate in turn spoke.
"Let me be clear, Agent Lefebvre.
What you did was not a simple mistake. This is a symptom of a much larger problem in our police force. And we are going to deal with this problem." Lefebvre had the impression that we had just tear away his whole being. His career. His reputation. Everything changed in an instant. The minister fixed the policeman with a piercing gaze. "I advise you to think very seriously about your role in this institution, Agent." A long silence fell in the room. Then the minister waved his hand.
"You can dispose." Lefebvre raisis, legs trembling.
He was no longer the same man as when he had entered this room. As soon as he walked through the door, he felt the weight of the world crashing down on him. And this time, no uniform could do him his honor. The affair exploded in the media, igniting debates on systemic discrimination within law enforcement. Continuous news channels, television sets, social networks. Everywhere, we analyzed, we argued, we were indignant. The images of Daniel Connate's arrest were broadcast over and over again, fueling the controversy. Two camps were violently opposed. On the one hand, those who defended Lefebvre, claiming that he had only followed protocol, that his control was justified and that the controversy was exaggerated. Some police unions stepped up to the plate, denouncing harassment against an agent for a simple mistake. On the other hand, those who denounced a blatant example of racial profiling. Experts, civil rights activists, and outraged citizens spoke out to say, if a simple routine check could humiliate even the highest-ranking member of the National Police, imagine what ordinary citizens endure on a daily basis. The scandal reached the highest levels of the state. The president himself was forced to react, calling for a reflection on police methods and the need for reform. But while many expected exemplary sanctions against Lefebvre, Daniel Conate made a decision unexpected. Rather than request his dismissal or a severe disciplinary sanction, Conate decided to send him to immersion in a brigade specializing in abuse of power and police discrimination. Lefebvre is not no choice. He could refuse and see his career collapse, or accept and confront a reality he had always ignored. He accepted. The 6 months that followed were an ordeal. The brigade to which he was assigned worked on cases of police violence, abusive controls, blunders passed over in silence. Lefebvre was confronted with stories he had never heard. He attended heartbreaking testimonies. That of a black father, controlled and slammed against the hood of his own car in front of his son 10 years. That of a humiliated young woman publicly because a police officer had decided that she looked like a thief. That of an old man, pushed around by agents for having just calmly asked for an explanation. He saw the fear in their eyes. He understood what he never wanted to see. He followed in-depth training on unconscious bias, racial bias, the history of police abuse. He read damning reports, analyzed videos of unjustified checks. He exchanged with more experienced colleagues, investigators who worked to restore trust between the police and the population. Gradually, he opened his eyes. At first, he rebelled internally. He said to himself that it was not his case, that he was not racist, that things were being exaggerated. Then, the truth imposed itself on him. Himself, by automatism, had believed in evidence which was not evidence. He thought back to that night. The way he looked at Daniel Conate, to his authoritarian tone, to his unfounded suspicions. He was wrong. And the more he progressed in this training, the more he understood that it was not a simple accident. It was a system that he had never questioned, until he became one of its cogs. 6 months later, at the end of his immersion, Lefebvre was summoned again. This time, it was no longer an interrogation. It was no longer a judgment. It was an assessment. When he entered Daniel Conate's office, he stood differently, less stiff,
less defensive, plus humble.
Conate observed him in silence for a few moments, then motioned for him to sit down.
So, Agent Lefebvre, what have you learned?
Lefebvre took a deep breath. He had not prepared a ready-made answer, but deep down he knew what he had to say.
I understand, General.
I understood to what extent our decisions can be biased without us realizing it.
I saw the fear, the anger, the injustice.
I realized what it feels like to be treated like a suspect for no good reason. I saw what I never wanted to see. Conate nodded slowly, analyzing his words. And what do you plan to do with this awareness? Lefebvre straightened his shoulders slightly, fighting for things to change.
A discreet smile crossed the General's face.
Then your mistake will not be in vain. Lefebvre looked him in the eyes and bowed his head slightly, sincere respect replacing the pride that once inhabited him. Thank you, General. Conate held out her hand to him.
Don't thank me. Make your uniform mean something. The Lefebvre affair marked a national turning point.
Under the leadership of Daniel Conate, a major reform was put in place. Now, every police officer had to undergo extensive training on racial bias and abuse of power before entering duty. Specialized units were created to ensure the ethics of police checks and punish abuse. The citizens began to regain confidence. As for Lefebvre, he became one of the most fervent defenders of this cause. He in turn trained young recruits, telling them its history.
Not to ease your conscience.
Not to erase his mistake, but for prevent others from committing it. He finally understood Theta uniform did not grant the right to humiliate, but the responsibility to protect. His mistake had changed him. And it was their Kone Tess' greatest victory.